Alright, so now we're going to show you how to use alphas with your mesh. Now you can see what I got here right now. This is the result of about 30 minutes of time and all the brushes we learned about in the last two lessons. So you can get some pretty decent results with it if you just mess around and experiment for a little while. Kind of got a nice rock sculpture-y kind of looking guy here. But anyway, so we have that. You can use whatever you want. You can use the base head all over again if you want, the demo head. Just bring that up. But now we're going to learn how to use alphas. And to start off, we're going to look over here in the alpha menu. Open that up. And out comes all these alphas right here. These are all in here by default. And of course you have your shelf. And an alpha is basically a black and white image that defines what parts of the mesh are raised and what parts of it are lowered. And it's an easy way to sculpt in really fine amounts of detail. If instead of sculpting in those fine amounts of detail like individually, if I wanted like kind of little bumps in his head or something, you know, I wanted to sculpt these in like this. Okay, this is gonna get tedious. Okay, it's gonna get tedious, and you're gonna lose a lot of time in a lot of instances by doing that. Wherein you can just go over here to your alpha menu, open up the dots right here, and we'll use drag rectangle to drag that out, and we have all these dots, okay, in one stroke, just as easy. That saved us a lot of time doing that. So we get this really cool detail with that. So again, you just go over here to your alpha menu and you can select whatever you want, and then you can use whatever stroke you want to draw it out. So for instance too, like one of my favorite ways to do this is I use this as trim on Shredder's armor on my Shredder piece on the portfolio. I use this alpha, which is a default alpha, and I turned on the dot stroke. Okay, by default doesn't look like much. Okay, you ain't gonna get anything with that. So firstly, before I go any further, I'm gonna divide them up another level because I want that detail to show. And what I did was I went up here to stroke and turned on my lazy mouse, and I made sure my lazy step was at about 0.75 ish. Okay, and I used that and I dragged it along. Now you can see it's kind of repeating, but it's close enough to where it looks like it's together, and that kind of gives a nice look of like a trim for an outer edge of something. So it was pretty cool to use on the armor because it gave it this nice ornate look. So that was just one of the tricks I employed while using that and working on one of my pieces. But you can do that and experiment with a lot of different shapes and a lot of different strokes and get different results from it. So, moving on, you can also import your own alphas. Okay, you import your own alphas. You can either create them in Photoshop, or you can download them online from other people, which is also something to look into. If you go online, you can look for alpha libraries off of sites like Game Artisans, Polycount, and CG Hub, and all that. Just look around. You can definitely find them. Even just Google it. You can find them and download new ones to play with. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my alpha folder, which is actually down here. I have a library of alphas that I use, and these are all it right here. And I have some favorite ones, of course, but I have a lot of them to choose from, and they're fun to play with. You can see the amounts of detail. You can see just by looking at the alphas themselves the amounts of detail that you're going to be able to apply to your mesh. So let's take this is one of my favorite ones, Dirty Circle. Let's open that up. So we have that imported now, and when you import it, it's going to show up in this top shelf right here. It's also going to show down here, but you'll notice it up here first. So with that selected, we'll just go ahead and switch back to drag rectangle, and we'll drag it out, and you can see all that nice little detail in there. That's crazy amount of detail. It's really a powerful way to drive your mesh home. You can get all that nice stuff in. Another one of my favorite things to do with this is I actually use the spray, and I would turn the intensity down really low though, and I would start to spray it on. Now it's spraying that alpha all over now, and I'm getting this rocky, kind of rough surface to it, but you can see all that nice detail showing in there. Very, very powerful stuff with alphas. So yeah, one of the funner things to experiment with. Get some crazy stuff with that. So anyway, so let's just say, for instance, we want to make our own alpha. We'll keep it simple, but we want to make our own custom alpha for this guy. Let's just say maybe we want, I don't know, some squares in his head. I can't really think of anything unique, but we'll just say, for instance, we want some squares in his head or something, some square dots. We'll go ahead and open up Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, you can use Photoshop for this. It's going to work all the same with any image editing program. But go ahead and start a new document, and typically you're going to want your alphas to stay pretty small. A good rule of thumb is to use maybe anything lower than a 256. Here's the thing, make sure your alpha is squared. 256 by 256, 128 by 128. You get what I mean. So do that, make sure it's squared. Oops. And open up a new document. Okay, so we got this open now. And you're going to want to make sure that you're just working in your black and white. Okay? Because this is what, again, this is what's going to define the alpha. Just like any other program, the alpha channel is the correlation of the black, meaning that it's turned off, and the white, meaning it's turned on. This can mean different values in different programs, but for ZBrush, the white is going to be the raised surface, and the black is going to be the submersive surface. So in order to do this, we're just going to do something really, really simple to show you how the paradigm works. We'll draw out a black square, and we'll just, that's a path right there, we'll just go ahead and fill this in, fill it with our foreground color, get rid of that work path. Okay, so we got the black triangle, or not triangle, I'm not thinking, I don't know my shapes, black rectangle in there, and we'll start a new layer over top of that, okay, because I'm going to show you how the different shadings work. Now, you know how I said black and white? Well, you can use different shades of black and white to get different intensities within your alpha. So we'll go ahead and use a different shade, black, which is gray, and we'll draw that over the black and fill that in. Okay, so we have that in there now. And now we're going to want the one that's going to raise up the most, which is going to be our white. So we'll do it and draw this in here. Start new layer. Fill this in with white. Okay, well obviously that went off into our background of the document here. Essentially, if it's going to be like this, then this entire square is going to raise up, and just these are going to be submersed. So just for the sake of example, we'll do it that way. And we'll drag this out in the middle. Let's flatten it first. We'll drag this into the middle. Nope, actually didn't mean to do that. Step back. Merge down. Okay, drag it out there. And we'll leave it like this, okay? Because I'm going to show you how this is going to work within ZBrush. Save it out and save it as a JPEG, because that's the most simple format. Just save that as Untitled. I'm not going to have to worry about file names too much. Go back into ZBrush and go into your alpha menu. Go down to Import. And we're going to scroll up here to our desktop, and we're going to look for our Untitled alpha, which is right here. So open it up, and now you see it's in ZBrush now. Okay, well you see in the alpha window that the white is coming out, and you'll see when we draw it out, I have spray on, drag rectangle, turn that on, and turn symmetry off with the X key. Okay, and then we'll drag this out, turn up the intensity, make sure we can see it, and you can see how the white is popping up and the gray is kind of slightly raised, and then the black is the subtractive part of this. Well, that's because the alpha paradigm is telling what parts to be raised and what parts to be shallow. Okay, it's pretty simple actually. So, and we can also go ahead and up here in the alpha menu, click that and go down to your transform menu right here. This is going to allow you to kind of manipulate your alpha within ZBrush without needing to jump back into Photoshop to do these same operations. Go ahead and inverse your alpha. Okay, and that's going to flip it around. You see that changed all your colors. But now you see how this isn't black necessarily on the outside. Now it's transparent, because in ZBrush, black means it's transparent. So when we draw it out now, you can see these shapes are the only ones coming up, because the entire outside of it is black. So it's transparent on the mesh. So it's not going to show up at all. The black parts of that alpha are not going to show up at all. So let's flip it back. Inverse it again. And draw it out again. Now you'll notice right off, well, you probably noticed this before too, but you'll notice that the corners are softened. Why is that? Our alpha has sharp corners in it. There's no reason why it should be like that. That is actually because of your focal shift. So because the focal shift is set at 0 by default, it's going to give a softer edge to anything you drag out or draw out or whatever. And in this instance, let's say we want the hard edges to stay preserved on this alpha. So if you open up your focal shift and you go all the way to the left, it's 93. Anything above 90 should, negative 90 rather, should be sufficient. Now we'll go ahead and drag it again, and now we have our hard edges back, more or less. These up here is only because the curvature of the mesh caused them to do that. But we got our hard edges preserved. That's what we wanted. Same thing, opposite, if you increase your focal shift to where it's a much softer, you're going to see a lot less of the edges of that, and probably only really the center of it. Okay. So let's jump back in Photoshop one more time. I just want to emphasize to you that in ZBrush, black is transparent, white is opaque. Okay? I'll switch all our colors back to the paradigm here. And that's pretty much it for that. It's pretty self-explanatory. You can do a lot of different things with your alpha channel and different shadings. Let me show you a quick example, actually. Go ahead and delete this. Say white. You didn't delete. I don't know why it's not deleting. So we'll just start a new document. Excuse me if I seem like I don't know what I'm doing. It's a little embarrassing sometimes when things don't work during the tutorial. Anyway, so in this one, I'm just going to draw out a rectangle here. And instead of just filling that with a flat, solid color, I'm going to go to switch my paint bucket tool to the gradient tool, and make sure I got the horizontal gradient on. And I'll drag it down here, and I'll do this right here. You see this? Well, that might not work, so we're gonna get in kind of off-white going, and we'll do this again. Not enough. There. It's better. I'm gonna deselect that, and we'll select it again, and copy paste, and drag that down, and just duplicate that layer again, and one more time. And usually I would merge this all together, but we're just going to move forward anyway. Actually, let's go ahead and merge it all together anyway, because we're going to inverse it. So merge your layers, image, adjustments, invert. And now you see everything's filled in black on the outside here. Well, that's going to be transparent. So save this out, the JPEG, and we'll just save it over our old one. No reason to keep it. Tutorial stuff. Open back up ZBrush again, and we'll import our new alpha that we just created. Okay, and we'll draw this out. Obviously we have our focal shift set too high, so let's draw it all the way back, get a decent part of it, and draw that again. You can kind of see how that gave me a sort of beveled edge on each one of those. And obviously, if you noticed, you see the correlation between this and the alpha itself. The gradient caused it to give it that slope, because obviously the white is raised, the black is shallow, and as that color shifts between each other, it's going to give you that kind of result. And if we just invert this, we have ourselves a vent of sorts. Okay. So again, you can get all kinds of different crazy stuff creating your own alphas or using existing ones. You can do a lot of really cool stuff with it, and that's where a lot of your detail is going to come from too. So you can have a lot of fun with that. Now also, real quick before we finish this up, I'll show you how you can use alphas with your masking. Same reason, or same thing you're doing with masking here, is that like before, you're drawing out your mask with a regular stroke or something. Okay. Well, sometimes you're going to want something a little more defined. You're going to want some detail in a certain area, and you're going to want to keep it in that area or something. So we'll go ahead and use drag rectangle. It's the most common stroke for this kind of stuff, and we'll go ahead and import us another one. I'll have to go down all the way through my menus and folders. Okay, so I'm back in my alpha folder right here, and let's see if we can find a cool little one that we can really get some cool stuff with. We'll just use this one. Okay, well, we can draw that out by default, right? With the alpha, get this grid-like, snake-like texture. Or we can hold control and drag it out as an alpha, as a mask, I mean. So now we have that laid out, but that's just a mask. So we can get this detail now by simply sculpting it in over the alpha mask. Go down to masking, turn your mask off so you have a better visible area, and we'll start to sculpt in with a regular stroke. And you can see we get some crazy results from it. You can sculpt that in over your masked out alpha. This can be really cool sometimes. You can do some really crazy stuff with it. See? So you can experiment with that too, with a lot of different alphas, and get some really crazy results. Okay, so that's going to be pretty much it for this chapter. We'll move into the next chapter and I'll show you some more tricks after that too.